Our performer tonight is essentially the reason I am in China. A few years back, through Writing Nights Press, I published a couple of books of theirs and a few individual pieces, and we remain friends. Fast forward to fall 2018, there's a teaching opening here in China. They make a post, I inquire, and a year later, I'm here. They are an award-winning writer. They're an American who currently lives in China. Their extensive published work includes poetry collections Silage, A Radiance, Undisturbed Circles, and The Rag and Boneyard, and a novel entitled Masque. Their work was described in The Guardian as poetry as salvation. I was welcomed with open arms. Now it's up to you to welcome to the stage Bethany W.
Okay, thank you all so much for coming. I will be reading today from my next novel, The Hungry and the Lost. It's going to be released by Parthian in a couple of months. So I'll start with one chapter from the beginning, Extinction. In the decades that closed the 19th century, great flocks of enormous white-plumed birds, so prized by haberdashers and ostentatious decorators of human homes, heron and egrets that were almost their twins, sent up raucous cries from their collective nests set high in the close-woven mangrove swamps. These birds gathered in their hundreds, their guano spattering the floor beneath the trunks, a strong ammonia-scented mass, white and liquid as whitewashed fly. It collected in piles a foot high underneath the larger collective nests, mingled with the calcium-rich discarded eggshells and the occasional deceased chick. All of this waste, foul as it is to think about, had a purpose, an important role to play in the life of the wetlands. The ammonia and calcium lent richness to a marshland soil that is otherwise unfit for growing things save for mangroves, poison ivy, boab, and the saw-toothed palmetto. A vegetable shaped like a palm that was named for its stiff, cellulite-edged leaves, which drew blood from any thin-skinned animal foolish enough to push unthinking through its crowded groves. These birds inhabited a world painted in blinding shades of blue and green, the water and swamps surging all around them, sending reflected light up to dance among the leaves, and all of this was punctuated by the snowy white of their own plumes. That color shone from the fine, crusted sugar and sand dunes, the detritus of a millennia's work on fossil shells, reducing skeletons of soft-bodied mollusks and the occasional crab to a fine, delicate powder. It shone from the mists that rose in clouds from the secret forest waterways, drawn upwards by the sun and dyed by that great open eye, the color of gold which has been washed by the blood of sunrise. And throughout it all, the great birds swooped, feather splayed and with glistening pinion, soaring or making their slow Jurassic way by foot through the water that rose up to their jointed knees, pursuing toxic meals in the tannin-laden soup. When the men arrived, as all men do, the hunters who brought them down in droves like the plains-bound ancestors who left buffalo corpses scattered throughout the ravaged grasslands, so many stinking knobs of bone. They came with birdshot. Sorry, my son. They came with birdshot and fine-woven nets to kill the air so full of their shrieking prey that an unaimed shot could send two birds spiraling down to earth at once. The men formed camps, then towns, ordering desperate gingham-wearing women from ads placed in adventure magazines with chattel descriptions. Woman, 27, good worker, child-ready hips, 31, even-tempered with good teeth. Women usually, though not always, too plain for wedding, or without sufficient dowries, who had sat too long upon their local shelves and needed more than anything free air to breathe away from the hurtful gossip and dissent. They were delivered with the other mail-ordered supplies, riding with the farm and hunting equipment, the new nets and the plows, their new husbands' names on slips of paper around their necks, like lost children. Sometimes their marriages were happy. There was a boom that lasted many years. The men built fine houses filled with great treasures, oil paintings and silverware wiped and dried every day to keep them free from slime and bluish creeping mold. The same kinds that appears in damp vaults, creeping over the faces of the dead. There was a general store, filled with quality things, more variety than a hunter's bride would usually ever think to want. Finally, they built a fine steepled church of the Protestant persuasion, hired a minister and his lovely wife. Oh, how the women envied her blonde hair that flowed like sea foam along her shoulders. They made a manse to keep them in tall, its beams carved minimally from hardwood, not just soft and rock-prone pine. It was a house meant to outlast generations, even in this water-sodden place. Eventually, the couple had a child. The town experienced nearly 3 decades of seemingly endless supply meetings with incessant demand, but as in all good displays of economics, the product gave out before the desire. The birds, save for a few token breeding pairs, eventually protected by Roosevelt in 1901, long after the slaughter, were reduced to denuded corpses. The bodies littered the marshlands until the time came when some desperate bone and bust hunter who had spent the last decade moving from scrabbling, potato-eating poor to land and servant-rich, only to cycle back to poverty again, made his way in cracked and wadded boots through the wastelands that were taking their bird breed one last time. And if they crunched down on the fragile carapace of one more rack of ribs, who would notice? The sound was soft enough to hide behind the wailings of the ever-rushing, moon-drawn tide. The sound of death is so often lost. Death came to them, to the whole town, in a manner such as this, and there it lingered for a while. Okay. Okay, so this is about a third of the way through the novel, and it's just an excerpt as the town is falling to pieces and everyone is dying and running away. Everybody needs a little death and destruction. Will. David is still lying to himself. He thinks that he has time. He has been sleeping in the small back room for days now, waking up later and later each morning with a red-stained pillowcase. The cotton batting clumped and clotted, scabbed over like an overused bandage. It took him 3 days of struggle before he knew he had to quit the church and the little work left to run and maintain it. There are only a few women left in town now, and most of them are living under his own roof. None of them have any inclination towards cleaning the vestibule. He has been trying to maintain it himself, saying, "When I get home, I'll get started on the paperwork for moving. I'll write my letters and my will." By the time he'd been out for an hour, he was finished, completely exhausted. He could not stand to see his family's worried faces, all of them suffering for him. It was enough to make him want to cry. But if he did that, they would think he wept for pain. They would waste their tears on him. No, there was nothing he could do except give in. Now his wanderings are limited to the path that leads from his new bathroom to his library and study, and back again after the light has fled. It's terrible how he reaches out in the night only to find his wife missing. But there's no time for nostalgia. That is past, along with the time for physical love. What remains is hard and deeply buried. The diamond that rests in the heart of good marriages, feeding on the flesh. Rose will still have that. It will outlast her life. The pen in his hand is carved from solid ivory, a protuberance of skull where words flow out in thick black tide. It feels right in his hand, slightly talismanic, as if this dead thing he inherited from his father were holding some incredible force, ready to be brought to life. Son of man, can these bones speak? Perhaps it is the fever. Certainly he does not feel well, as if the light around him were bending, a hole in the world to let something through, a creature too big for it, too big for this world. It buckled under the weight of him, hung there on that hill of bones, and spooled us all to hell. The words on his paper waver and shine. They could mean anything. He had better stop looking. Instead, he shifts his head, a difficult thing in this thick air, and looks at Persephone in her stained glass room. She turns her chin, looks back, dark eyes contacting his from their nest of pale skin and flaming hair. She raises her pomegranate, red lips moist and smiling slightly, takes a bite, and sends the red juice flowing. This has got to be a fever dream. Please God, let it be. The air is thick, solidified light, on the point of tearing. There is something huge, immensely real, throbbing below the surface of the air before his eyes, about to break through. David knows that he is screaming, but he has no idea what. He only knows that the world is bulging, fit to burst with the pressure and the joy. Maybe he can use his pen to burst it out, to let the creature from his to free its creature from the cocoon, the ivory base, the silver nib, so sharp, surely they could puncture fabric already grown so taut. He reaches out, his arm outstretched to make the cut where suddenly a vast pressure he was unaware of, like a dammed up tide, lets go at last and hides the flaming air in flood. That blood-dimmed tide is loose, and everything, the ceremony of innocence, is lost. A delicate vein bursts somewhere, vital in the hollow chambers of his skull. His brain is flooded with a stream of liquid, cells drowning like lost children in a hurricane, irrevocably lost. David slumps across his desk, pen in hand, ink splashing everywhere, in thick black wash, obscuring all he had written, whatever it was. The last thing he sees is light of lovely intensity. And the last thing he feels is a sense of terrific peace, a long tunnel leading through a green wood to a soft clearing lined with moss and a small, clear stream where he can take his rest. When Joy finds him, he is slumped over but breathing. She heard him screaming, so how can he be asleep? And yet he is. He is unconscious when Rose and Malva come across them a few minutes later, when all three females, struggling and grunting, shift him to bed. He never wakes, but who knows? Bodies in this climate are well known to rise again. Okay,
hi, Bethany.
Let's start again.
Hi, Bethany. I've got some questions for your book. I'm wondering the genesis of the book and the influence of myth, both on the novel and your writing in general.
Okay, cool. I've been interested in mythology for a very long time, especially the work of Carl Jung in modern mythology and the way that myths surface in our lives. With this book in particular, I wanted to see if I could join together old myths and modern or semi-modern events, because of course it's Edwardian. But I was very interested particularly in the myth of Persephone and the journey to the underworld and the return from the underworld. So that had a definite strong thematic influence on the work.
Were any of the characters harder to write than others? There are some awful bordering on evil characters like the Johnsons and some wonderful joyful characters like David. Do you have a particular favorite or one you really don't like writing?
Oh, yeah. Okay, so Marie, the lead character, was actually the most difficult because I put a lot of my negative energy into her. So she embodied a lot of me that I don't really like. And I tried to spin that, my shadow, my Jungian shadow, into a positive influence in the story. Of course, the Johnsons, I've known people like the Johnsons. I've known people who will sell their own mother for just a little more cash. So especially I drew on that from a lot of people that I knew in Texas. Probably shouldn't say that. But anyway, I drew a lot of that from life. I think that it's impossible to write anything that is pure fiction. Everything you write is going to be a little bit autobiographical. Everything you write is going to have a little bit of your history in it because it is essentially yourself. Every novel, no matter how stylistically advanced, has a part of you, a part of your soul. Whether that's good or bad is up to you in the way that you present it. So all the characters were fairly easy to write, but some of them I enjoyed more than others.
Yeah, I see your son is there, and How do you balance your life and your job and your writing?
Oh, yeah. Okay, so Zeno, I'm not gonna lie, he has complicated things a little bit. But he actually serves as an inspiration. Because in many ways I'm writing for him. This is not my purse. And in many ways I'm writing for him. We die, obviously. We're all gonna die. But our children and our work hopefully will live on. Our children definitely will. But if we want something of permanence, something that will outlast us, the child and the writing are both two things that do that. And of course, I wasn't actually planning on having a kid. And so he came on something, he was something of a surprise, but a very good one, I think. In terms of my process, usually I've actually been writing recently while on the stepper on the elliptical. So I've got an elliptical machine, and I'll be carrying the child and writing furiously on my phone to redraft and edit later. As you can see from the book, a lot of the characters are named after people in my family. My mother is named Joy Marie Pope. Her maiden name was Rowe, and there is a Walsh family strain. My middle name is Walsh. And this ties into the fact that all writing is about yourself. The only territory you really know is yourself. Zeno, new and beautiful and brilliant as he is an undiscovered country, both for me and for the world. I can't tell you what's going on in his head. I can make some pretty good guesses. He's hungry, he's thirsty, he wants comfort and love. But the only thing I can tell you for sure is what's going on in my own mind. And the writing is one way to do that.
So last question, what are you working on now?
I'm doing a series of short stories that deal with the apocalypse. So many different apocalypses. Each short story has a different way that the world will end. Not with a bang, but a whimper. Only a few whimpers, mostly bangs. And I'm also trying a new poetic form. The double acrostic sonic crowns are what I have worked on before in the past. I'm trying to do something new with acrostic sestinas cycles, dealing with retellings of myth, because I find it interesting, and also it engages that part of my brain that loves puzzles. So that's it. And also, parenting the baby. Yeah.